Good morning. This is Kim, founder and CEO of All In Leadership Coaching and Consulting Group, and I'm so excited. I am interviewing and connecting with Dr. Pauline Crawford. She is the founder and owner of Corporate Heart International, and I'm excited to talk all things conflict, how to turn that into collaboration, how to lead with your heart, how to have magical conversations, which is what her passion is. So without further ado, I'll just turn it over to you, Pauline. And if you want to dive into your background, your experience, and what led you to where you're at today.
Fantastic. Thank you, Kim. It's absolutely a delight to be interviewed by you. You're so young and beautiful and courageous, and here I am with my silver hair and my baby boomer years, but I feel that we both have a passion for life and life in business. And my background is that I'm British. I have traveled around the world to be here now in the USA. I have my green card, I have my American husband, and I have to say that I never expected 8 years ago that this is where I would be. So if we look at my background, I was born a long time ago. I'm 70 now. And the advantage of age is that I've been through different experiences than you, and yet we both study women. And I led a very, dare I say, very happy, normal life in England for many, many years. I went to university. I was a statistics and sociology major. But also I love maths, and I really imagined that my life would be fairly straightforward. I would have 4 children like my parents, and I would, after my first job, etc. So having married my university boyfriend, I did that. I had a job, and then I did have 2 children, and then I realized I was a bit of an entrepreneur, so I loved actually doing things and creating things. But I actually became an image consultant in the late 80s. And what was interesting about that, Kim, was that it brought me in touch with women, and I did have male clients as well, but really studying women and how they felt about who they were in the mirror and myself. So my journey was to find out about me. I was a bit of a tomboy, and I wasn't really sure about my sort of femininity. Not that I wasn't quite straightforward. I'm a mother, I'm now a grandmother, but I didn't feel the same as some of my sisters. And so when I became an image consultant, I understand how bodies work, and we'll come back to that later, because that was where I created my core tool, which is the gender dynamics map. But what for me was interesting, and I think it relates to women as leaders and as entrepreneurs, is that I came across something new. Image was very new when I met it. Nobody was doing image in the UK. It had started in America, and it was a new sector. And the same thing had happened to me early in my life. I worked in the holiday business when holidays were not packaged, and it was all new. And you've got to remember, this is before technology got hold of us. But the image work became my passion to take it into the corporate world. And so unlike many image consultants who were beauty, what I call beauty and fashion image consultants, I was a kind of psychological image consultant. So I studied business psychology, and eventually, after a very, very successful business for over 6 years with another image consultant, I changed track and I developed Corporate Heart. And Corporate Heart in the UK then became Corporate Heart International here. But the passion there is about people. So how do people, how do they behave? What do they do at work? Why is it sometimes very stressful at work and not a good place to be? And where's the heart of it? So Corporate Heart was about the heart of every single person, whether it was a 10,000 body strong corporation, or it was a small corporation, or a tiny business, and of course the advent of entrepreneurs working on their own. It all came down to behavior and who am I? And that's really where my passion for Corporate Heart International has come from, is that I just don't see the point. I'm very straightforward. I don't see the point of going to work and having a hard time. You know, life should be enjoyable because you tap into your natural gifts. So one of my passions is introducing my clients to their natural gifts. And what I mean by that is that which you didn't learn at school.
Right.
That which you didn't have to have a certificate on the wall for. I mean, all of those are useful, but what's your natural gift? And also, especially now, what do women bring to work that wasn't there in my younger days, when there was much more of a divide between men go to work and get a job for life, and women. Even my father said to me, you know, we had two brothers and I had a sister, so he said to my sister and I, but you're just going to get married and have children, so we'll send the boys off to an expensive school and you can go to the local one. Now, in fact, you know, of all of my siblings, I'm the one who's out there being very adventurous in the world. And I'm sure my father, who's now passed on, is smiling from a cloud somewhere saying, I knew she was a bit of a rebel, as I was called when I was a young teenager. But I think the world has changed so much over 70 years. And, you know, to actually be in this place now where women are coming forward, and my passion is for women to understand men, for men to understand women, for the boardrooms of the UK and of America, corporate America, all male boardrooms cease to exist. They all become combined male, female, diverse entities. And that's where I feel that maybe we can have a conversation about leadership, because that's where, although the numbers are against us at the moment, that's where I see in the future.
Yeah, and going back, Pauline, you brought up natural gifts. How do people actually tap into those or find out what they are and allow them to become their strength, leverage them in the workplace, and then it's their superpower? Where do you actually start to identify that and then leverage it?
Well, in many ways, it's actually very simple. Although lots of people, when you say to them, what's your natural gift, their first instinct is to say, oh, I don't know. And to be honest, especially women, sometimes I think because we doubt ourselves. But it is actually across the board. So for me, it's actually having a conversation, and I love to work in a conversational style. It's the conversation about, so, you know, when you went back to being a child, what was it you were known for? What did you love doing? You know, were you the child who was always chattering, was always dancing, was very extrovert? Were you a natural artist or cook, or were you a natural writer? Were you a natural mechanic? You know, we often think boys are those, but girls are as well. You know, I used to take things to bits and put them back together, and I became a dressmaker. So it wasn't about woodwork. For me, it was in dressmaking. So are you a natural nature lover? Are you a natural cheerleader? Are you a natural? So really having that conversation. And then once we isolate that and then attach it to what we've now learned. And of course, the dysfunction is when somebody goes, oh, yeah, that was my natural skill. And yet I spent a whole lifetime learning to be something else. Mm-hmm. Now, everything is useful, I think. So it's about adding it to whatever people do. But essentially, our natural gift is something we don't need to go to school for. Therefore, it's down to us to bring it into what we do, and also to work out its value. Now, an example, you might say, well, if I'm a natural cook and I'm not a chef, but I'm going into a corporate world, but probably as a natural chef, you're very good at selecting things to go together. You've probably got a very heightened sense of smell. That's your awareness. So it doesn't need to be explicitly useful, but it's part of who we are as human beings. So when we're getting to know somebody, if we tune in at that very core level, we will find a relationship that lasts a lot longer.
Mm-hmm. I like that. How you identify it, tap into it, and then figure out how you can weave it into your current state and kind of bring it to life.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I discovered, I don't know whether you have, but this came from a client once. I was showing him through a psychometric profile what his natural skills were. And he said, "Oh, you mean I can use those?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "But down around here, they always find out what you can't do, and then they go and teach you that." And he said, I'm expected to be omnicompetent. I thought that was a lovely word. But it's a foolish thing that I think we've done traditionally, because if we keep on trying to teach the things that people are not specifically geared to, then they get very distracted from what they do best.
That's right. Yeah. And, you brought up a really good point about work should be enjoyable. We should actually be enjoying what we're doing, passionate about it, fueling our fire. And so really tapping into our strengths and then finding where that fits and where we can do that day in and day out. And I think naturally as humans, because we all bring different experiences, background, complexities to the table, there's just naturally going to be conflict. And I know that you talk about that a lot, and I've been able to dive into that, into your work, into your book. And for me personally, I do feel like conflict in a healthy environment is actually really beneficial.
Yeah.
And you touch on it too, about how you can transpose conflict into collaboration. And I think it's all about creating that safe environment, having the right guardrails, setting the expectations on the forefront, where you can then have innovation and people are comfortable speaking up or presenting new ideas or voicing their perspectives. So what strategies or ideas do you share that really transforms conflict when it's maybe negative or harmful to the environment, to transform it into positive collaboration?
Okay, well, I think that's what you said is really important, that conflict can be a force for good. So that's the first thing, is a mindset that says conflict is a force for good if I look at it that way. So it's definitely a mindset. And then the core to it is difference. So I always say, people say, "Oh, but other people are so difficult." That's where my conflict comes from. But the truth is that I say there's no such thing as a difficult person. There's a difficult situation, because the other person they're different to us. They might be in a position of authority over us, or they're irritating because they're from another department, or even in our family life. So understanding difference and the fact that, given that we're all unique human beings, we need to value the differences. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean we're going to get on with everybody, but it gives us a permission to be different, and to recognize and to be able to say, "Gosh, I realize that you're different to me." So if we're both women, so we're similar, but we're different ages, we're different cultures from background, looking at the differences, we can still find things that connect us. So, you and I are connected in our passion for women and leadership. Now, we may have different views on that, but that's the similarity. But if we understand the differences, then conflict becomes almost a spectrum that we enjoy, because we can disagree, but we can say, "Gosh, in my experience, happens, but I listened to your experience and I never thought about it like that." Now, I might not agree with what your experience is telling me, but that's okay too. It's like bits of a jigsaw puzzle. They may not fit, or they may fit. And when they do fit, then we have a great relationship, we have a team. And hopefully if a business sets that scene in their leadership, this idea of inclusive leadership, then it will work. So it starts with a mindset. Mm-hmm. And then it goes on to how do we identify differences? Because we do live in a world where we like the safety of similarities. But in fact, if we understand conflict is like an energy, and it's an energy for good and an energy for opportunity, then we can even enter crisis and chaos as well. So it all comes down to a mindset, knowing yourself and understanding difference. That would be my starting place.
Yep, that's spot on. Talk about chaos. So in my mind, I'm picturing just a chaotic scene of a team or a group, or, you know, a team coming together, different departments in a company, an organization. And while they maybe tried to collaborate, because of all of the different perspectives and maybe the heightened sense of emotions that can come with it, it may turn into chaos. How do you view that? And do you have to diffuse it, or what are the strategies around that?
Yeah, again, I think we have to understand our part in it, and also that mindset comes in again. So as conflict falls into chaos because those two things are different, there's a feeling almost like a tornado. You know, it's like, you know, in a tornado, everything gets kind of whipped up. You know, you can't stop it. You think, oh, that's a truck, but no, it gets whipped up. So again, understanding that you're now moving parts, and you got to still understand each other, all those things, but it's a different energy, and it can go off course. And I think it's all about the uncertainty. So a lot of people find uncertainty really difficult, but again, it's a choice. So it's not to say you might always feel okay, but if you make that choice to say, right, we're going into a lot of chaos, actually in that chaos, there's going to be lots of opportunities, and there's going to be danger as well. So the Chinese symbol for chaos is danger and opportunity, I think. But it's like the risk, the danger, and if we're entrepreneurs, we take that on board anyway. But even if we're in an organization, if we take responsibility for our contribution as an employee, then we should be able to take on some responsibility for the chaos around us. And I think the reason it's really important, especially for women, is that there is a lot of chaos in our world at the moment. That, you know, things are being thrown up and they're not coming back down in the same order. Mm-hmm. You know, even the goal of getting 50-50, you know, women on board, women entrepreneurs, women going out doing businesses, still having families, everything is changing, and it's not going to suddenly return down to the same pattern that we had before. Mm-hmm. So I think actually that mindset that says it's okay that it's not going to return to where it was before, because even though I thought that was okay and safe, something else is coming along. And if I know myself, I'm always me inside that chaos. So a lot of this comes down to knowing ourselves, being confident that whatever gets thrown at us, we'll manage it, we'll deal with it, we'll observe it, we'll look at it. We might not like it, we might move away from it sometimes, or we might go forward, we might get involved in an argument. But the only person in my life I can actually deal with properly and be in charge of is me. Mm-hmm. And so chaos, I've designed a strategy for chaos. So it's challenge. What is your challenge? Is it your mum, dad, your boss? Harmony. Do you seek it, even if it's a difficult project? A is the attraction, being attractive and attraction to the right people to you. So especially a boss who's trying to look for women on board, a male boss, how is he going about that strategy? And then the O is optimal. So whatever we're doing, to do it to our best. And the S is success. So my goal is that if we can take the word chaos and we can remember those steps, even if something, you know, if the wind's really got up and we're up there, we're going, somewhere in our head, we're going, yeah, I remember that. I'm going to come down. And I'm going to come down onto the ground on my feet and be okay about what's happening next.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
It's not always easy, but right. Then, you know, your external things like breathing and meditation and yoga, or eating a nice meal, or going to see a friend, or laughing or crying, whatever tactic you want to do, you use it for yourself.
Mm-hmm. That's right. So when you talk about gender and kind of the ratio and getting more women on boards and kind of that strategy that a lot of companies are talking about and putting out publicly. How do you weave in your gender dynamics map? And can you dive into that and talk to us about what that is and how companies can apply it?
Yes, the way I've developed the map, again, came from my own life history. I wanted to understand where I was in the map of more and more women, lots of different men, and then looking at the women, lots of different women. And that came when I was an image consultant. And I thought, no, if I work out where I am, then it gives me a better handle to know where everybody else is. So being a mathematician and loving geometry, I actually designed a physical map. So literally, it's a square and a circle. So even that simplicity is that men function very much in a square, topic-centered boxes, and I mean that metaphorically. They very much either or, linear, one step at a time. What's the task? What's the solution? Now, obviously, there's a range of personalities in there, but generally, and this is well evidenced by many, many people, from Dr. John Gray with Mars and Venus through to everybody. But I'm not trying to stereotypical them, because there are lots of feelings and emotions in there, but it's a very one step at a time. Whereas women are in this circle. We're in this circle of emotion and hormones, menstrual cycles. You know, there are certain things that all women will experience during their lifetime. And that gives us a center which is about nurturing and relationships. And we want to find the solutions like the guys do, but we let it by asking lots of questions which don't need answers, and sharing and caring. And men often look at that circle and go, I don't know what's going on in there. So that's the baseline. And what I say is it's a bit like two different computers. So you might say that the men's one is more like a PC and the women is like a Mac. But overlaid on that, and this is where the fun comes in, because we're out there now, women are in the workplace. There are different types of women. So what I do is I overlay a masculine, feminine, masculine, feminine energy circle. So you can get some men who are more masculine minded, some who are more feminine minded. So I always quote as a feminine minded man, as an example, is Nelson Mandela, because everybody has an image of him, very strong, very male, but highly intuitive, would listen, would observe. Now, whether he gained that through his lifetime experience, but he definitely was that kind of leader. Whereas we know there are many masculine-minded men who are very structured and very bullet-pointed, very right. Now, not all men are like that, but that's the range. So as women come into the workplace, if we need to manage them or deal with them, integrate with them, talk to them, we don't need to be men. We need to understand our territory and be very clear that we bring strengths to the square. So inside the circle, there are also masculine-minded women, which I am one, and there are feminine-minded women. And what I mean by that is it's not totally different women, because we're all women, we're all female, but there's a different mindset and reactive process. Generally, I find that the feminine-minded woman can be very sovereign in her way of dealing, loves to build her tribe and her territory, whereas the masculine-minded woman can sometimes be quite independent and, under stress, she goes, I'll just go do it myself. So there's sometimes a conflict between the different characters on the territories, but my goal is to understand it's 360 degrees. And that it embraces all the other diversities, such as LBGT, generation, culture. And I have to say, I use this map in a program in Malaysia with an all-Muslim audience of women, and they loved it. It transpasses all the other diversities because it's fundamental. And the interesting thing is that there's a physicality to it. So you find that the masculine energy is very angular. Somebody like Pierce Brosnan, who's got a very sharp face, as opposed to Tom Hanks.
Yes.
And other girls, there's Jamie Lee Curtis over Meryl Streep. So there's that. I've actually got quite an angular body. I stand very straight. Now there are different degrees of that, and that's what I learned when I was an image consultant, and that's the finer detail of it. Because women are more complex, there are more body shapes of women than there are of men. I think it's almost like that's nature. But essentially, one of the keys, I think, to the boardroom is that men in that boardroom are very serious, in fact, about business. They really do like things quite cut and dried. And women come in with this wonderful, multifaceted, lots of ideas and creativity, which is excellent, and they need it. But sometimes men don't know how to cope with it, because when a woman asks a question, she often doesn't want an answer. Mm-hmm. But when men hear a question, they think she wants an answer. So they try and give you an answer, and the woman goes, oh, no. And then they're even more confused.
Right.
And I interviewed over 50 men over the last year, and I'm still doing that. And they all say, well, we're just a bit confused about women. And what I want to impress to women is that, especially in the boardroom, is that we're designed to work together. We work together really well, but we need to accept our differences, because if men don't understand us and they don't see the win, they will not take us in. And we will keep on having this resistance and chaos. Mm-hmm. So again, it comes back to, it's not doffing our head to them. It's actually being able to go in and say to the bullet point man, I think you've got 3 bullet points there, yes. And when he goes yes, and then agrees with you, he's on your side. You can then start bringing in the emotion. But don't try shaking him saying, you've got to be emotional, because he's going to freeze into that box. So I know that you understand this, and I think the key to it is that today, and we can't go backwards, there's so many women ready to go into that top level, mm-hmm. which is great, is that the resistance seems to be there a little bit too much from the men, because they don't actually know what the benefits really are. And it's all about the conversation.
Yeah, and what I'm hearing too is a lot of it that we really have to be centered and understand kind of what level or area we are on the spectrum, so that we know how we are showing up first and foremost. Yes. And then being comfortable recognizing what spectrum the other players, other people in the room are on, and being able to play off of those dynamics.
Yes.
Not changing ourselves to cater to them or fit the mold for them, but just having that deeper sense of awareness, recognizing how we are, how we're wired, how we like to communicate. Do we like to have structure in the bullet points, or do we like to be more creative and free flowing? And then once you know that, you can really start to have more meaningful conversation and adjust your style to be able to cater to that.
Yeah, definitely. We really, and all the men I interviewed all said, we really love women and we want them in the workplace and we want them just to be themselves, but they need to know that we need to be ourselves too.
Right. Not trying to change anybody.
Not trying to change. And they all said, one of the things they all said was, thank you for asking me. Because my question to them was, what's happening for men about men? And each of them, and they were busy men. And I thought, why are they giving me the time? And they said, no, this is good because nobody asked us. Mm-hmm. So maybe it's key for women just to ask. So, not how are you feeling, because some men won't respond to that, but so how's life for you at the moment? And then listen.
And is that what you would say leads into your definition of a magical conversation?
Well, yes, because for me, magical conversation is about aiming to come into a conversation without judgment or assumptions. Now, that obviously that's very difficult because we're natural human beings. We make assessments, their assumptions, but to be as open as we can and to use what would be called a Gestalt style. So in my experience, this is what I see, this is what I feel, this is what I hear. So I'm not saying this is the way it is. I'm just sharing, and I'm listening, and I'm contributing, because the second rule is no anger. And what I mean by that is you can be passionate and and get, you know, a little bit feisty. But if you get into real anger and slam the table or whatever you do, you're not going to be listening, and you're not going to be contributing in a way that is helpful. Would you agree?
Right, definitely. Yep. At that point, your mind is a little bit
Yeah.
foggy, and you're leading with your emotions, which at that point in time, you're removing all of your logical thinking steps.
Well, that's right. And if you look at, I don't want to, but not political, but you know, in the political arena, people are always shouting at each other. Pictures of in Parliament in England the other day saying, and you're going, you can't hear when people are just shouting at each other. And the last rule is no coercion or urgent control to do something before the cake has risen. I think obviously you can't go on endlessly having magical conversations. So in a corporate environment, they're timed. So it might be an hour session, and in that session you have 3 very quick 8-minute conversations. But in the conversation, there's freedom to just focus onto the central topic. And also men in general don't like chattering too much. So, but the rule is that you're looking at the subject in the middle of the table, not yourself. So you're not saying, I think this subject is that. We're looking at and going, if I think about that, possibly that's, and you're listening to what is bubbling up, and you capture that. There were different methods to do that with exercise sheets or whatever, but it's something that people don't often do because we tend to come in with the past, and something happens and we go, that's not possible. And actually, anything is possible. Actually. So we've always got the freedom of choice, including leaving the room or leaving the job, or we got the choice to lead in. And I had an experience of this it was actually a German bank, a session we were running in Stuttgart or somewhere, and these male German bankers were very defensive. What's this all about? And as we started one of the conversations, they looked to me and said, so what am I supposed to do? I said, the instruction was just to get involved.
Right.
And then you could see them going like that. And then they realized that if they didn't get involved, they didn't get heard. But they were so used to the upfront voice telling them what to do. It was that shift. It was wonderful to watch because they kind of went, oh. And it was almost like permission to play. And that's really the energy that I see for Magical Conversation and for Corporate Heart, is that we know what the status quo is, that women and men, we've got the talents, we've got the skills, we know all the stuff about, you know, job selection and biases. Yeah, we've still got to deal with all those. But when we get into conversation, I think I believe and I feel in my heart, it's about thinking about the future as if it is exactly as we would like it to be. And then once there becomes an agreement on that, and that could be multifaceted, then you can work from present to future. But currently we're always going from the past. So what's wrong? How does it differ? You know, women, we've got to be in the boardroom. Well, maybe we do and maybe we don't. There was even, just out of information, there was a roundtable, business roundtable of some very serious corporate, probably mainly men, and businesses like JP Morgan and Stanley and all this stuff. And they all agreed that business needs to be different and needs to recognize people as well as profits. Now, you and I were on that agenda for years, but just the fact that they acknowledged it, they don't actually know what to do next. But the first stage is that they've come to an agreement that we need to look at the stakeholder, the employee, the customer, just as much as the shareholder. Now, if some very serious companies and serious chairmen can see that, and we know that a lot of companies are seeking to employ women into the boardroom, then we need to, it's almost like the chaos is being there, but it's bringing this energy of flow. And so we're looking for that harmony, that attraction, that optimal success. And this is the time for it.
Yeah.
I really believe it.
Yeah, I mean, that your point about that, the human element, the human capital in any company, when you nurture it, cultivate it, create this space where they're seen, heard, can lean in, want to lean in, and feel like they're adding value with their contributions, productivity and profit will fall into place if you prioritize your human capital first.
Well, that's right. And what's interesting, Kim, is that you and I know that. We talk about it. So many people that you and I meet talk about it. But it's like for these guys up in, this was in New York somewhere, it's like, this is a big statement. It's like the governor of California last year pronouncing that we've got a mandate for one woman on board. And he's pictured with the certificate and two men.
Right.
But, you know, I think I love human beings because sometimes we just don't realize what's about us. And everything that we need is here now, right now.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And you'll be surprised. And I love it when surprises happen. So let me just share this quick story. My daughter had said to me, "You're the ambassador of Magical Conversations." I had a card with very scrolly ambassador type writing. This was in 2008. And I went to a garden party full of lawyers, and this female lawyer client of mine came over and said hello, you know, glass of wine. And then she introduced me to her husband, who I had not met, and said, "Oh, darling, this is Pauline Crawford. She's the ambassador of Magical Conversation." And I was going, "Oh, no." And he turned around, took my card and said, "This is exactly what we need in the law. We're just too serious." So you never know at what point somebody is going to shift. And that was, you know, that was an assumption on my part. And it really taught me a lesson. And that's, I think, where we have to, as women and men, but as women, is to stop making assumptions about all the things we know have been happening and look, okay, we've got the talent, we're perfectly geared, but we're not going onto a male boardroom. We're sharing a platform for running this world together. Mm-hmm. And the woman might be the boss, the man might be the boss. But, you know, in the Fortune 500, there's only 33 CEOs, and not many of them have got a balanced board. So maybe it needs to be a harmonious board, not a balanced board. It's all about our words.
That's right. Absolutely. It shapes our perception of what the opportunities are or potentially negative situations.
Yes, I think so. And I think we have to really be careful with words that become misunderstood. And I don't know what you think, but I think empowerment has become one of those. And I feel that most men think that empowerment just means women. Mm-hmm. And of course it doesn't. But again, it's like often audiences, when I mention gender dynamics, they say, "Oh, that's about women."
Right.
And I go, no, there's two genders here.
Right. Yeah.
And so I think one of my feelings with Magical Conversations is just to almost watch the words as they come out of your mouth and see where they land. And if somebody reacts in a way that you wouldn't like them to, then check in. Mm-hmm. You know, what was it you thought that I said? You know, that classic thing like, you know, you didn't hear what I said because whatever. But just, you know, another thing that I often do is say to a client, you know, could I have your permission to share some observations I've made of you? Mm-hmm. And somebody might say, "Oh, that's very prosaic, saying, can I ask your permission?" But when you ask, especially a man, for permission, they feel very privileged, and they will stop and listen.
Right. Yeah, that's good. It's good stuff. So, Pauline, where can all the listeners find you or grab a copy of your book to learn more about strategies that they can implement or follow you on social media?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn as Pauline Crawford, Dr. Pauline Crawford. I love being on LinkedIn. I find it's my sort of space. But I'm on Instagram and Twitter under Pauline Crawford or Pauline Crawford-Omps, and I'm on Facebook as Pauline Crawford-Omps. So the Omps is O-M-P-S, is my husband's name. So though my official name is Pauline Crawford, that's my green card name, my passport name. And look for me under that. The book is actually under the name of Pauline Crawford-Omps, and it's Magical Conversations, Transforming Conflict into Collaboration. It's on Amazon. And I have a website called missmagicalconversations.com, but I'm also bringing my UK corporate heart site into being here in America. So I'm in transition. I'm in a little bit of chaos, but I'm flowing through that. I also have a blog, which is Gender Dynamics DNA. And I have pages on Facebook under Magical Conversations, TV and Movement and Gender Dynamics. And Gender Dynamics bringing harmony to the world, this is my mission.
Awesome.
So I'm sure if all of you are intelligent about social media, you will find me.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for all of the insight, strategies that people can apply, and just the really great conversation.
Oh, I loved it. But as you know, we're passionate about what we do. We love speaking and we love chattering, don't we? That's a definite special trait for women.
Yes, it is. Yep. One of our passions and strengths.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks, Pauline.